Hillary Clinton was reading from Fire and Fury, which sounded humorous.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't watch any of it. I was playing video games. Which often has the ability to make me lose track of time. There we are, do not disturb. For 1 hour.
For 1 hour.
For 1 whole hour.
Oh boy.
Now, today I can talk about stuff. I'm wondering if I should just go over my verbatim with you, because at this point, by the time we go over my verbatim, it's going to be a little ways past.
We could do.
I wrote it last
helpful.
week.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So let me email it to you real quick, actually. Because, I mean, there's plenty of stuff to talk about, but... I'm going to start writing down Bill, and it should say William Bolden.
Yeah, that's I didn't get a choice in that.
I hear ya. My older brother is William, but he goes by Frank. His middle name. Like my son, he goes by his middle name. This is in OneDrive under Files. I have to talk myself through it. Under Documents, under Candidacy, under Provisional Work, under CPE. Verbatim number 5. I had to think through the files.
Alright.
Does that sound a little bit overly file?
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of categories to dive into.
I guess I shouldn't put that away. I guess I should look at it while we talk too. Yeah, because I wrote this about 2 weeks ago, and I just figure by the time we end up talking about it, it'll be 3 weeks removed, and I won't probably remember it as well.
Okay. Alright. So... So you went to visit with somebody in the hospital and they want to talk about the human sexuality.
It just sort of came up naturally.
Okay.
He didn't really have an agenda to talk about it. But whenever that subject comes up, I stop talking as much as possible.
And why? I mean, I assume I know a reason, but why would you do that?
As someone who's provisional, one of the things I try to do is piss off as few people as possible right now, until I'm fully ordained and I have guaranteed appointment. I have guaranteed appointment right now, but they can take it away.
Yeah.
In a few years when I'm fully ordained, it's very tough for them to take guaranteed appointment away. That's one of the great things about the Methodist Church. If the church doesn't like you, they can't kick you out. And you can't lose your job if you lose your church. You just get a new church. So you can be, in some ways, a lot more authentic to who you are.
Okay.
And right now I feel a lot more like a politician sometimes than a spiritual leader around the issue.
Right. Well, so what do you think, other than not pissing people off, what do you think is a good part of that strategy, and what do you think is lacking in that strategy of being diplomatic or quiet?
One of the good parts, and one of the reasons I probably won't change my strategy that much even after I am fully ordained, is I have to preach to people who don't agree with each other all the time. And I have to be in conversation with them and in relationship with them. And I need to learn how, and I need to be able to sort of steer conversations and continue to point towards Christ instead of our own sort of thoughts. So if somebody at church asks me, Carl, who do you vote for this year? I say, I don't remember. Or are you Republican or Democrat? I say, I'm neither. Because I have to be available to everybody.
Sure.
And so that's not something that I'll probably change that much.
Mm-hmm.
It also makes it to where I can be in better communion with people who I disagree with on a vast majority of things politically. I'd say 75% of my church members disagree with me about a lot of things politically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they know that I disagree with them on a lot of things politically. For instance, this week I talked about accountability and integrity in the sermon, and talked about Larry Nassar, the doctor out at Michigan State, and I talked about how forgiveness is available, but somebody actually has to seek repentance in order for that forgiveness to be there. And I just stopped short of saying we can't just give somebody a mulligan if they refuse to ask for forgiveness. I stopped just short of that.
Okay.
Thankfully, there was another example in the news of somebody who wasn't exactly as repentant as they tried to make themselves out to be.
Okay.
And so I don't go that far, but I do speak around the issues a lot. And I think hopefully 10% of the people might be able to grow from that on any particular Sunday. And I've seen growth in some ways. So yeah, that's one of the good parts. That's sort of the good of that sort of strategy I have for speaking about these things. The bad is I don't feel like I'm able to be completely authentic with them at all times. Which, I mean, Jesus wasn't even completely authentic. Don't tell anybody on the Messiah.
What does authentic mean to you?
It means, I suppose it means sort of being an open book at all times, letting them know who I am, what I am, how I'm feeling, what I believe at all times. And I'm fairly certain I'm open with what I believe 90% of the time. I try to be authentic about 90% of the time, unless it's not going to be kingdom building, I suppose. But I don't know how kingdom building it is to sort of hold myself back from other people at the same time.
Yeah, your definition of being authentic, I would find those people very annoying. Authentic people.
I suppose it's more, it feels as if I'm hiding a part of myself from other people.
Okay.
And that feels dishonest to me. I guess that's
Okay.
what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know anybody, well, maybe there is somebody, but his hair may corrupt his authenticity. I mean, just being available all the time with your thoughts and your opinions and your, that's exhausting to me.
Well, I don't think I'm talking about just trying to make my opinions known just to make them known.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not going to sit on Twitter all day and do that.
Okay.
I think what I am saying is sometimes it just feels like disengaging from these conversations in the way I do for the sake of peace makes me feel like I'm not really working on the issue or confronting the issue at all. And as is our tradition of the Methodist Church, we just kick the can down the road on this.
Yeah, Methodism isn't alone in that. Yeah, So let me ask you: would you say that you have a principle in how you are making decisions of how to engage and when to engage issues? Is there a principle that you're using?
Yes.
Okay.
I typically don't say anything unless I absolutely have to. Um, I heard one pastor compare it to being a parent of multiple kids. You don't get involved in their arguments and stuff like that until it's absolutely necessary.
First sign of blood.
Which sounded like a really good guiding principle.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think operating out of a principle is authentic. I mean, if it's something that guides one's behavior.
Yeah.
You know, I had a woman about two and a half years ago who is the opposite of most people around in these parts. And, you know, she wanted me to be her Bible-thumping liberal, you know, and go after all the... She says, I know you believe in the same thing I do. I know you do. And I had to explain to her as gently as I could that while I do talk, teach, and preach about things that you might interpret as being political, I talk about it as justice, or you know, Jesus' gospel message has a calling for us to move society forward towards the better, and that's, you know, there's a lot of people that anytime you mention justice of a sermon, you're being accused of being one side or the other.
It happened to me on Saturday.
But you know, at the same time, I will not refrain from that kind of discussion because I think it's the right thing to do. Now, I'm not going to go, you know, say you got to vote this way or you know, everybody's the right to their opinion. And it's how you stay in relationship with people who disagree with you is the important thing. So, so, you know, that at least that's the way I think about it.
I'm just, especially as this next year goes on, so I'm sure you might have heard some bits of it with what's going on with the Methodist Church. It's finally coming to a head after 50 years. Next year we have a special general conference of the whole church, America, Africa, Asia, Europe. Everybody is coming together, and we're going to hash out the human sexuality issue once and for all, or for the next 4 years. But that's the only reason they're meeting. At the last general conference, they had to basically say, we're just going to table this entire issue and call a special conference, which has never been done before in the last 250 years. And so there's a lot of rumors and a lot of thoughts about what this is looking like, where we're going as a church. Are we going to split into 3 different churches with one extremely right-wing, one extremely left-wing, and one centrist church? Are we going to stay as the same church and just allow churches that disagree to leave? Are we going to get rid of what we call the incompatibility clause, which is where it says in our Book of Discipline that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching, only a few lines after saying sexuality is a gift by God. So nobody really knows what's going to happen. This past Saturday we were with the bishop. 4 different districts. I had to go down to Verona and meet with the bishop, and she said, I don't know what's going to happen. And then she made us talk about it for 2 hours with each other, which was awful. Because nothing is gained from those conversations a lot of time when people aren't even completely clear on what LGBT stands for.
Yeah. I mean, I can commiserate.
And you've been through that
We've
already.
been through that. And it is painful.
I just think that conversation's going to come up more and more over the course of the next year. And I'm not trying to like hide it or sweep it under the rug because, as the bishop said this week, something's going to change. I don't know what it is, but the church isn't going to look the same in 2 years as it does now.
Right.
And I have a responsibility to prepare people for that and to have that sort of conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think I was involved in a congregation in Richmond when in 2009 when things happened, and one of the things that I think went generally well was that the denomination, ours, you vote on a social statement. And then, what are the practices that then come to the church after that social statement? So those were the two things that were voted on in 2009. But for a year, 2 years prior to that, we had the social statement, and we had some study guides on how to present it to congregations.
Yeah.
And I think the pastors did a really good job of presenting it, of allowing people to have voice, as long as it was respectful. That was the only thing that they demanded, is that you don't yell it out.
Yeah.
But you have a voice, and to be respectful of others who feel differently. And while that conversations over and over again were tense, in the long run, that congregation really didn't lose anybody over the issue.
Yeah.
They lost a couple of families over the issue of calling a woman as a pastor, but the sexuality issue that on same-sex issues was, we wound up not losing anybody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you're right. Not sweeping it under the rug would be an important principle to have. And so how you deal with and live that out,
Yeah.
would be.
And typically, I've just sort of talked about it in conversations.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it came up here.
So yeah, let's get to this conversation
I don't
here.
remember exactly how it came up now. See? We were talking a lot about how he was feeling. He was complaining about the hospital staff. At the meeting, I was talking about the Staff Parish Relations Committee vote whether to keep me or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I said I'd be happy to stay. PPRC said they'd like for me to stay. He couldn't make it to that meeting. It was the day before his surgery, and he just wasn't feeling that great. So he wanted to stay home. He wasn't really all that worried about it. And I mentioned that the district superintendent was retiring and going to a different church where another church member's family goes. Realize I put down Dolly's name there. And then I said the superintendent told me there was a possibility of a lot of retirements this year, and there could be a lot of people looking to retire before the denomination has the conference on the issue of sexuality next year. A lot of people jumping ship, apparently.
Yeah.
Some people are worried that there could be a split and they want to get out before pensions get messed up or anything like that happens. He said, and then he talks for a long time. I never really did understand any of that. I never understood why people would leave a church just because they don't like what somebody is saying or because they disagree with somebody. I mean, take BP. She got all upset when you started talking about tithing and giving. I mean, you have to. That's your job to talk about all that stuff. I don't know for sure, but I know where she lives, and I know she's probably pretty well off. I don't know why she'd get upset over some of that stuff. It's kind of like J&T. They used to come here for years back. They lived out in Cape and Bridge and started coming over here when RP was pastor here. I guess he invited them, and once they came here for quite a while. What stopped them from coming was when they learned what apportionments are. Then they just quit coming. Throughout all of this, I've sort of been letting R talk and nodding my head along. I'm waiting for him to get on to talking about the human sexuality issues, though, because that's where all of this started. He says, I mean, there's some churches that just keep all the money for themselves and only do for themselves. One of my friends at work goes to the Baptist church down in Woodstock, and this church uses everything they have to do ministry by themselves. People really do end up getting upset about differences and understanding. I mean, even at Old Bethel, we've had a guy that lived that kind of lifestyle be part of our worship every week for years until he moved away. I don't think that some of the older folks would have approved if they would have known. I mean, like B&L never would have been okay with it, but me and my ex-wife C, and I think D knew, and all the younger members knew. The younger members being those under 60. Even if we didn't agree with his lifestyle, we still accepted him as he was. Most people at the church didn't even know it. I guess I just think if you live that way, even if you don't condone it, I should love him anyway. I mean, I know that the Bible is weird and you can read stuff differently, but I see it pretty plainly. But that doesn't mean I quit coming to church if somebody like that is coming. I think we should all be welcome. Some people just don't see that way, though. I mean, my mom, she's 85 years old, and you should hear some of the stuff she says. I think generationally we're all a little bit different on that stuff, me and her. She can really say some terrible things when she hears about people living that type of lifestyle. At this church, at this point in the conversation, I'm not really saying anything. I'm still nodding my head. I might be offering an occasional uh-huh. There are a couple things going on here. First off, I never expected that R was this open to the LGBTQ community being in the church with us. While it appears to me that he doesn't condone it, he's more of a centrist on the topic and happy to have the people in church. I'm also noticing that I'm far more closed off than usual. As we aren't sure what our church is going to look like in 18 months, I don't know that I'm safe to really be bold in my stance on this subject. I have similar views to R, even as I don't have any issues with the LGBTQ community and hope that we can find a way to affirm them in our church. I'm also sensitive to the fact that other people believe differently. And I would say, I don't think most of them feel that way because they're bigots, but instead because of the way they were brought up. Things like what they've always been taught, possibly a lack of experience with the LGBTQ community, and other things that they have embedded in their theology. They often take a hard line. That doesn't mean I can't love them and care for them still. In this way, R and I are very close in our beliefs. However, as I said, I'm worried about putting my cards on the table as far as this conversation is concerned. I still don't understand back to him. I still don't understand why somebody would leave the church just because they believe differently, though. Like to say, it isn't just this. It's people like BP. I still don't understand why she isn't in the church anymore. Some people just get so tight about their money. I don't think people really should quit coming to church, but just because they don't believe the same way about some things. We can't make people happy all the time. And that's sort of where the conversation went out. He talked for a long time, longer than I wrote there probably. It was probably at least 25 minutes between times when I said a sentence.
In this, with him talking, and you wondering if it's safe even to talk about what you're thinking and feeling about the issue.
Yeah.
So I wonder how that might affect, or you think it might affect, the pastoral relationship with him when you're not. As I hear your question, and wanting to be authentic, whatever that may mean for you, I wonder how refraining how does that feel, and how does that, you think, impinge upon your ministry?
How does being authentic feel?
I mean, well, no, refraining. The refraining.
Oh, refraining.
Yeah.
I suppose it feels safe
Okay.
to refrain.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I don't know what the church is going to look like in 18 months. And technically, if the church falls apart, I'm not ordained. And so I gotta figure out what that looks like for myself. And so that's another reason I'm really not trying to put any of my cards on the table. Not talking is sort of a safety mechanism, I think.
Okay.
That's how that sort of makes me feel.
What do you think that does to your ministry with him or with anybody else?
I'm not sure he doesn't feel affirmed in the conversation. I'm not sure he even noticed he was talking that long, because he was pretty bored. He was alone all week. So he could have just been talking and not even remembered any of the conversation we had.
But he evidently has some anxiety about it because he brought it up, about the issue
Yeah.
and what it means to the church. Right?
Yeah, I think his anxiety has to do, it's not just with that, I think it has to do with congregational unrest, or when people's feelings get hurt at church when they stop coming, or when you just disagree theologically with one point so you quit coming.
Mm-hmm.
I think he seems to be far more worried about the health of the community than than the viewpoint of any one individual.
Okay.
Which I think is a good thing. My relationship with him has changed a lot since I started at that church.
Okay.
We had a rocky start at that church. It's going a lot better now, and I get along with him much better than I did when I started at that church. Now that I sort of understand him and he understands me a little bit better.
Okay.
So this isn't the first one of these sort of conversations that him and I have had where I've been surprised at his viewpoints with things. Give you an idea of him. He is Frederick County through and through. Born and raised here. I used some of the vernacular of Frederick County in his speech there, such as the term "like to say." I don't know if you've ever heard anybody say that around here. You get into this side of Frederick County or Stevenson area, and some people say when they, instead of saying "as I was saying" or "like I said," they say "like to say."
Like to say.
And I don't know where it comes from, but
Okay.
that's so he even talks like he's lived here his whole life, which he has. But I guess it was a day or so before the election. When I think of somebody from Frederick County, I just automatically think he's going to be conservative. He says, "I can't vote for Donald Trump. That guy's crazy." Which I was like, what? As I think about it more, though, it makes more sense for me because this is a guy who has had health problems almost his entire life. He had cancer when he was 17. He works a lower income job. He was probably pretty happy with the strides in healthcare that were made under the last president, and he's probably not too happy with what things are looking like right now.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that would be his position on some things, and he's had a harder life than a lot of people, so I think he's able to be a little bit more empathetic. So it shouldn't surprise me, this stuff, but just knowing where he's from and knowing his family members, it does when he says things like he says.
Yeah. So the way I look at this, you're wondering about two things. One is sort of the more global church issue of what the church is going to look like, how things are going to happen, how that affects you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm curious what you think about what he needs from you.
At this point, in the situation he's in at that moment, I just think he needs somebody there to hang out with and talk to him. Because, I mean, he just had this surgery. Things weren't going quite as well as he'd like them to. He's doing much better now.
Okay.
He's actually ahead of schedule in his healing right now.
So he had open heart surgery.
Yeah. This wasn't his first heart surgery he's had. I'd be surprised if there's much of his real heart left.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, since I've been there, this is his third heart surgery. His first open heart surgery. They had to do open heart surgery because of his cancer and all the radiation around his lungs that he'd had. They're too weak in order to deflate them by going through the ribs and then pumping them back up.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's just bored to death right now, and so really what he needs is somebody to talk to, because he's not able to go to work right now for 3 months. At that point when I got there that day, his mom hadn't been there to see him yet, or his brothers hadn't been there to see him yet. He only had a list of 5 people that were allowed to see him because of the flu restrictions
Oh, yeah.
at the hospital.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of people couldn't come see him. He asked people from church not to come see him. He really didn't want to get sick, which was smart. But he was pretty bored. So I think the conversation him and I had, it probably had a different impact on both of us. I think he really just wanted somebody there to talk to. I don't think he cared what we were talking about, because we talked about everything from football to his nurses to his family to what we talked about right there.
Okay.
Because he was
So it was wide ranging.
yeah, he was getting ready to watch football after I left.
Okay. Do you think he has any ongoing needs from you?
I mean, I still call him. I try to go to his house, but he doesn't answer the phone when I try to get to his house. I mean, he still needs presence because he's still not able to go out of his house on his own yet. He's not able to work for 3 months at least. He's actually not able to. He's not able to pick up more than 10 pounds for the next 3 months, and he works at the Home Depot warehouse.
Wow.
And so he's out of work for probably 6 months.
And he lives alone?
Yeah. And so I've been encouraging people at church to give him calls and to, if they live near him, give him a visit now because he can see people now. And I'm trying to do that myself. It's really more about presence ministry right now because, yeah, he's just bored to death.
So what is your... What is the major question that this raises for you that I in this process can be helpful with, or the group can be helpful with